Welcome back to In Ohio Country Today. And with me today is Mike Estadt from the Ohio State University. You're an extension agent at Pickaway County. But you also have another title.
Right. I co-chair a carbon footprint team for OSU Extension that's made up of extension specialists, carbon specialists, soil specialists in not only our college, but in the School of Natural Resources.
Well, before we get into exactly kind of what you were talking about or synopsis of what we talked about, give us a little bit of background on yourself because it's kind of diverse, right? You've been involved in production agriculture and all kinds of things like that. Right?
Yeah, I've been in extension for 31 years, and I have farmed. I've ran purebred Angus herd for a number of years, and as I moved into Pickaway County, I have an agronomic and a farm management specialization, and so I've been over the years seeing, exactly some of the things we've talked about here today is this progression of conservation practices and the idea that farmers are being asked to do more with less, and so today was just kind of an extension of that in the fact that now that we understand that there is a change in our climate, and there are going to be a large amount of dollars pushed into climate programs and climate resiliency, is that farmers need to make informed decisions on whether or not they want to voluntarily participate in these markets.
So your presentation and kind of your what we talked about was how what's actually happening in the carbon market. Mm-hmm. How producers need to understand what the pluses, minuses are, the pitfalls of it, and how this carbon market and sequestration fits and is going to help with the climate portion of what we talked about.
And earlier. I think the thing that I've wanted to try to emphasize over the last night and this morning with attendees is that this isn't the first carbon market that's come along. We had one about 20 years ago called the Climate Corporation, and it wasn't a very well thought out. It didn't have the infrastructure. It didn't last very long. But the difference in this time around is that it is a consumer-driven market. The consumer is the one that's interested in their carbon footprint, and they're interested in doing business with and buying products and services from companies that are more environmentally and socially conscious. So that's really the difference this time around, is that the consumer is driving this more than just this oblique market.
Well, you talk about, the carbon credits. Who actually is buying these? I mean,
right.
It's not. This is something you would almost say that's kind of, well, we know it's not invisible, but it kind of really is. And so there's who's acquiring these
two big buyers. First of all, there are emitters, whether that be industrial emitters, petrochemical companies, airline companies, companies that have large supply chains that know they contribute greenhouse gases in their daily business life. And so these are the Exxons, the Deltas, the American Airlines, the utility companies, the people who whether or not they reduce their emission, they are buying credits to offset their emissions. So they're not reducing, they're paying somebody else to sequester carbon either in trees or in the soil so they continue to emit at the same level that they're at.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. But if I'm a producer, right, and Delta Airlines is not going to call me up and come out and negotiate to buy my carbon credits.
That's right. I mentioned that is the fact that these companies don't want to deal with 10,000 farmers across 3 states. And so that's where we've seen what I call the middlemen that have emerged into this carbon market. And not to name any in particular, but there are about a dozen out there that are very active in the agricultural industry across Ohio, Indiana, across the Corn Belt. That's where this is really being seen the most, because we know that in order to sequester carbon, the key thing is to grow biomass. And so that's why you don't see this out in the desert west, you don't see it in the upper plains or the southwest, is because it doesn't rain enough to grow biomass. And the idea is, the more biomass you grow, the more carbon you can sequester. So that's these companies are basically aggregating acres and aggregating contracts that and a carbon credit is 1 metric ton, 2,200 pounds of carbon. So when they aggregate all this carbon, and after it's been verified and checked that it has been sequestered, then these credits go into the open market, and then the Exxon Mobils and the Chevrons and then the people like that then buy the credits from these middle people.
I thought it was interesting. There was something you talked about that's a project, that's a pipeline, right? that is right through the heartland of the U.S., right, where a lot of the ethanol plants are.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to touch on that project,
Yeah.
and maybe not necessarily everybody that's involved in the project, but the basis for the project, right?
Right. And so one of the byproducts of ethanol production is CO2. Now, a portion of that CO2 is sold into the beverage industry. That's how we get carbonation into our soda. But there is excess amount of carbon dioxide that is produced in ethanol. So there is a pipeline proposed and is under development that will connect all the ethanol plants in Iowa, parts of Nebraska, and South Dakota. Pipeline is going to terminate at a terminal in Illinois where it will be compressed into liquid carbon dioxide, and will be pumped back down into Earth from where it came. And I shared with folks here the last couple of days the business plan and the cost structure for that is that company is going to get paid about $50 a ton for the amount of carbon that they put back into the bedrock.
Yeah, I find that's kind of interesting. It's I was not aware of that till you had mentioned that, and so the point with that is that companies, ethanol companies like ADM or whoever is involved, Anderson's, whoever was involved with these ethanol plants, and one of our other sponsors, Poet Industries, they're in our part of the world, they're quite large in the ethanol industry as well. So they are very serious about doing their part.
One of the other ways that ethanol companies are looking at carbon and carbon emission is that, again, they are going to be looking at what I call a carbon insert. Is basically a farmer out here would grow basically low carbon corn. So if they can verify that the farmer has reduced his nitrogen usage, uses cover crops, maybe uses no-till on his corn acres, that corn, that product, raw commodity that goes into ethanol production, that would be labeled low carbon corn, and that's another way, that's a carbon insert. So that's how a lot of companies in their supply chain are addressing global greenhouse gas emissions.
Well, there's just a lot more information, that we can talk about with this carbon sequestration. Where could somebody go to find out more information?
Well, we have our own website at the Knowledge Exchange. If you just do a internet search on Knowledge Exchange CFAES, you'll get the knowledge. Our website where we have a carbon page. We have some white papers. We have some legal stuff from Peggy Hall, our ag law specialist. Brent Sonjan, one of our environmental economists, has put a couple white papers together on what is the potential for cropland and forest land for the amount of carbon it can sequester. We've got some, like one of the handouts I handed out today with just basic terminology and that you may see in a contract. We also have partnered with our commodity organizations, the Corn Growers and Soybean Association. We have links to their websites where they have carbon market information. So that would be where I would start. I wouldn't do a Google search on just the word carbon market. It'll blow your mind how many hits you'll get. But define your search a little bit before you go out there and just start doing internet searches.
Well, Mike, thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate your time. Appreciate your sharing your knowledge and bringing farmers and producers up to date of what's going on in the carbon market.
Okay. Thanks for having us.
We'll be back with more in Ohio Country Today right after this.